The screen explodes with the deafening roar of an engine as a ballistic missile tears through the velvet black sky of the modern Middle East. Red sirens blare over a montage of flickering, grainy footage. Abraham's ancient tent trembling in a sandstorm, superimposed over the glowing radar screens of a 21st century command center. 4,000 years, a voice whispers, vibrating with a haunting, gravelly intensity. That is the terrifying distance between a silent decision made in a desert tent and the fire raining down on our headlines today. We zoom in on a single drop of water falling from a cracked canteen in the year 2000 BC, which morphs into a tear on the face of a modern soldier. This isn't just politics, it's a family blood feud that no diplomat can settle because it began with a man, two rival women, and a promise that split the world in two. Why has this ancient fracture never healed? Why does the ghost of Ishmael still haunt the plains of Iran and Israel? Before we peel back the layers of this 4,000-year-old mystery, make sure to subscribe to Bible Mysteries Africa. Hit that like button and share this video to help us uncover the hidden truths of our sacred past. Prepare yourself, because the origins of the next world war were written in the sand long before the first bullet was ever fired. This is the story of the brotherhood that broke the world. 4,000 years. That is the staggering distance between a quiet decision made in a desert tent and the fire raining down on our headlines today, where the skies over the Middle East are torn by missiles and the world watches in fear. My brothers and sisters in Nigeria, you must understand that what we see today, the rivalry between Israel and Iran, the tension between nations, did not begin in a government office or on a modern battlefield. It began within a family, at a dinner table, and between two women who could no longer share the same roof. This is a 4,000-year-old wound, and the reason no diplomat can heal it is that it is not a political problem, it is a spiritual and ancestral fracture. To find the truth, we must travel back to Ur of the Chaldeans, a place of wealth and status where a man named Abram lived a comfortable life until the voice of the Almighty shattered his reality, commanding him to leave everything behind for a land he had never seen. God gave Abram a package of promises that would make any man's head spin: a great nation, divine protection, and a name that would bless every family on earth. But there was a mountain in the way of this miracle. His wife Sarai was sterile. Genesis 11:30 records this with clinical, painful coldness. Sarai was sterile. She had no children. Imagine the tension of walking toward a destiny of uncountable offspring, while every passing month reminds you of your empty arms. Abram was 75 when he left Haran, taking Sarai and his nephew Lot into the unknown of Canaan, building altars at every stop to a God who promised the impossible to a man growing grey without an heir. 10 years passed in that heat, 10 years of waiting, 10 years of silence, until one night, God took Abram outside and told him to count the stars if he could, promising his seed would be just as numerous. Abram believed, and God counted it as righteousness, but belief does not always stop the human heart from growing desperate. At 85 years old, with biology screaming that time had run out, Sarai made a decision that still reverberates through our world today. She didn't complain against God, but she tried to help him by offering a human solution to a divine problem. She gave her Egyptian servant Hagar to Abram as a concubine, a practice common in those days, but one that bypassed the miracle God intended. Abram, perhaps tired of the waiting, accepted this human shortcut without a word of divine consultation. He stepped out of the path of waiting and into the path of works. Hagar conceived quickly, and the moment the servant felt life in her womb, the atmosphere in the tent turned to poison. Hagar looked at her mistress with contempt, and Sarai, the woman who had orchestrated the whole plan, found she could not bear the mockery of her own servant. In a fit of regret and resentment, Sarai blamed Abram for the misery she herself had invited. Abram, washing his hands of the domestic fire, told Sarai to do as she pleased with Hagar. What followed was affliction. The Hebrew text uses the same word that would later describe the slavery of Israel in Egypt. Sarai was so harsh that Hagar, pregnant and alone, fled into the scorching desert toward Egypt, a journey that should have been her death sentence. But our God is the God who sees. Near a fountain on the road to Shur, an angel of the Lord appeared to this runaway slave, the first person in the Bible to receive such a personal celestial visitation. The angel told her to return and submit, but he also gave her a promise that mirrored the one given to Abraham. Her offspring would be multiplied beyond counting. Her son would be named Ishmael, meaning God hears, but he would be a wild donkey of a man, his hand against everyone and everyone's hand against him, dwelling in defiance of all his brothers. This was a prophecy of perpetual conflict, a boy born into tension before he even took his first breath. Hagar returned. Ishmael was born when Abraham was 86, and for 13 years, this boy was the center of his father's world, the presumed heir to the promise. But God was not finished. When Abraham was 99, God returned to establish a formal covenant, changing their names to Abraham and Sarah, and dropping a bombshell. Sarah, at 90 years old, would bear a son named Isaac. Abraham fell on his face and laughed, a mix of joy and disbelief, crying out, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before you." He loved his first son deeply, and while God promised to bless Ishmael and make him the father of 12 princes and a great nation, he was clear the specific, eternal covenant would go through Isaac. The blessing was shared, but the covenant was exclusive. When Isaac was finally born, the laughter of celebration soon turned to the heat of war. During the feast of Isaac's weaning, Sarah saw Ishmael, now a teenager of about 17, mocking her son. The old jealousy flared into a radical, cruel demand: cast out this slave woman and her son. Abraham was heartbroken, but God told him to listen to his wife, promising again that he would preserve Ishmael because he was Abraham's seed. The next morning, in a scene of agonizing wait, a father woke up before dawn to send his own son away into the wasteland with nothing but bread and a skin of water. Can you imagine the silence of that goodbye? Hagar wandered until the water ran out, placing her dying son under a bush and walking away so she wouldn't have to watch him perish. But the God of Africa, the God of the wilderness, heard the boy's cry. He opened Hagar's eyes to a well and reaffirmed that a great nation would rise from him. Ishmael grew up in the desert of Paran, becoming an archer and a father of nations, while Isaac stayed in the land of the promise. These two brothers eventually met again, only to bury their father in the cave of Machpelah, a silent reunion of two divided destinies. Over the millennia, the descendants of Isaac became the nation of Israel, and the descendants of Ishmael became the great Arab peoples. While the modern Iranians are Persians and not biologically descended from Ishmael, their adoption of the Islamic narrative linked them to this ancient struggle of belonging and exclusion. The conflict we see today is the shadow of that desert tent, fueled by 4,000 years of feeling replaced or threatened. It reminds us that when we try to manufacture our own blessings instead of waiting on God, we create fractures that history cannot heal. Great catastrophes are often born from small, understandable human decisions: a wife's impatience, a husband's silence, a servant's pride. Today, the world still staggers under the weight of that one night in the tent, proving that human solutions for divine problems often leave behind a legacy of fire that only the Prince of Peace can truly quench. Stay faithful, trust the timing of the Almighty, and remember that your choices today can echo for 4,000 years. From the presence of her mistress, Hagar fled into the brutal expanse of the Shur desert, a woman carrying a child and a heavy heart. But in that place of desolation, she encountered a divine presence that changed everything. The angel of the Lord gave her a difficult, perhaps even painful order: return and submit yourself to the authority of Sarai. However, God never gives a command without a promise. The angel revealed that the son she carried would be named Ishmael, meaning God hears, because the Lord had heard her affliction. He promised to multiply her offspring until they were too many to count. Observe the weight of this promise, my brothers and sisters. It was almost identical to the covenant made with Abraham. God was promising this Egyptian servant a future of grandiose multiplication, ensuring that two mighty peoples would spring from the same root. But the prophecy also carried a warning that still echoes through the centuries. Ishmael would be a wild man, a wild donkey among men, with his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. He was destined for a life of perpetual conflict, dwelling in tension with his brothers. Hagar returned and gave birth to Ishmael when Abraham was 86 years old. For 13 years, this boy was the patriarch's only heir. He sat at Abraham's feet, learned the ways of the desert, and was treated as the firstborn who would inherit the promises. But then, when Abraham was 99, the Almighty appeared again to refine the plan. Abram became Abraham, father of many nations, and Sarai became Sarah, the princess. Then came the news that seemed impossible. Sarah, at 90 years old, would bear a son named Isaac, and with him God would establish a perpetual alliance. Abraham's reaction was one of pure shock. He fell on his face and laughed. But even in his wonder, he thought of Ishmael. He pleaded with God, saying, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before you." It was the cry of a father for the son he had raised and loved for over a decade. God heard that prayer, promising that Ishmael would be blessed, beget 12 princes, and become a great nation. Yet the specific eternal covenant was reserved for Isaac. The blessing was shared, but the alliance was exclusive. When Isaac was finally born, the atmosphere in the tent shifted from celebration to crisis. During the feast of Isaac's weaning, Sarah saw Ishmael, now a teenager of about 17, laughing. Whether he was playing or mocking is a matter of ancient debate, but for Sarah, it was the final straw. She demanded the expulsion of the servant and her son, refusing to let Ishmael inherit alongside her Isaac. To Abraham, this was deeply painful. He was being forced to choose between his own flesh and blood. But God intervened, telling Abraham to listen to Sarah, for the lineage would be reckoned through Isaac, though Ishmael would still be made into a nation because he was Abraham's seed. The following morning, before the sun had even fully risen, Abraham did something that breaks the heart to imagine. He took bread and a skin of water, placed them on Hagar's shoulders, and dismissed her and the boy into the desert of Beersheba. Try to feel the weight of that moment, a father sending his son away with nothing but a few liters of water and a piece of bread, watching them disappear into the shimmering heat. The water quickly ran out, and Hagar, in total despair, placed Ishmael under a bush and sat a bowshot away, crying out because she could not bear to watch her child die of thirst. But the God of Bible Mysteries Africa is the God who hears. The angel called from heaven, "Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the boy." He opened Hagar's eyes to a well of water, saving their lives. Ishmael grew up in the desert of Paran, became a master archer, and eventually fathered 12 princes, just as God had promised. He built his own story far from his father's tent, a nation born from expulsion, but sustained by divine providence. If you are moved by these ancient truths and want to understand how these hidden mysteries shape our world today, I invite you right now to subscribe to Bible Mysteries Africa. Don't forget to hit the like button and share this video with your family and friends. By joining our community, you help us bring the light of the word to more people across the continent and beyond. The descendants of Ishmael spread from Havilah to Shur, near the borders of Egypt and Assyria. They became a people of the desert, nomads, warriors, and merchants who eventually merged with other tribes to form the great mosaic of the Arab people. Islamic tradition, emerging thousands of years later, identifies Ishmael as a key ancestor, a link that millions of people hold sacred to this day. Meanwhile, Isaac's line led to Jacob, whose name became Israel, and his 12 sons formed the 12 tribes. Their history is one of exile, exodus, and monarchy, but the conflict we see today between Israel and Iran is a complex layer of these histories. While Persians are not direct descendants of Ishmael, the Islamic conquest of the 7th century and the later 1979 revolution transformed Iran into a champion of the Ishmaelite narrative against the State of Israel. It became an ideological war, a struggle where an ancient family feud was adopted by a nation to serve a modern religious cause. Irony drips from this history. A people not directly descended from Abraham has become the primary antagonist of his descendants. By embracing the narrative of the oppressed brother, Iran has inherited a 4,000-year-old wound. We cannot ignore the oil, the nuclear programs, or the modern politics, but beneath it all lies the substrate of a tent in the desert, When we hear the rhetoric of elimination and existential threats, we are hearing the echoes of Sarah's demand and Ishmael's cry. The last time the two brothers were together was at their father's funeral, where Isaac and Ishmael buried Abraham in the cave of Machpelah. No words of reconciliation were recorded, only the silence of two men fulfilling a duty. Today, the tragedy is that this fracture remains. It was born not of evil, but of human impatience and the desire to solve divine problems with earthly shortcuts. Sarah's desperation, Hagar's pride, and Abraham's compliance all combine to create a civilizational divide. As you go about your week, remember that your small decisions can have eternal consequences. Do not try to rush God's promises. Trust His timing and walk in peace with your brothers. May the God of Abraham guide your steps and bring healing to our world. Thank you for watching Bible Mysteries Africa. Subscribe and stay tuned for more revelations. They spread across the vast horizons of the desert, from the borders of Assyria to the edges of the Red Sea. They were nomads, merchants and warriors, weaving themselves into the great mosaic of peoples that would eventually inhabit the Arabian Peninsula. More than 2,000 years later, the emergence of Islamic tradition would identify Ishmael as the noble ancestor of the Prophet Muhammad and the father of the Arab people. This is a connection that millions of souls hold sacred to this very day. Meanwhile, the descendants of Isaac, the child of the promise, followed a path of fire and transformation. Isaac begot Jacob, who after a wrestling match with a celestial being was renamed Israel. His 12 sons became the 12 tribes, surviving slavery in Egypt, crossing the Red Sea in the Exodus, and establishing a monarchy in Canaan. Theirs is a history of exile and return, a story that eventually birthed the modern nation of Israel. But where does Iran enter this ancient family drama? The connection is not biological. The Persians are Indo-Europeans, ethnically distinct from the Semitic sons of Abraham. In the beginning, they were not enemies but allies. In 539 BC, Cyrus the Great of Persia conquered Babylon and issued a decree allowing the Jews to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. The Bible even calls Cyrus the Anointed of the Lord. So what changed? The transformation began with the Islamic conquest in the 7th century, which turned Zoroastrian Persia into a Muslim land. By adopting the Islamic narrative, the Persians inherited the spiritual lineage of Ishmael. The 1979 Islamic Revolution sealed this fate, turning Iran into a theocratic republic that placed the opposition to Israel at the very center of its identity. Today, a people who do not descend from Abraham have become the main antagonists of his descendants, all because they stepped into an ancient story of sibling rivalry that began 4,000 years ago. It is the wound of Ishmael versus Isaac, the servant's son versus the child of the promise, playing out on a stage of modern geopolitics, oil, and nuclear ambitions. When an Iranian leader speaks of removing Israel from the map, or an Israeli leader speaks of an existential threat, they are not just discussing strategy, they are tapping into a collective memory that refers back to a single tent in the desert. The Bible records only one final meeting between the two brothers, at the funeral of their father. Genesis 25:9 tells us that Isaac and Ishmael buried Abraham together in the cave of Machpelah. There is no record of a hug, no transcript of reconciliation, only two men performing a final duty in heavy silence. Ishmael died at 137 years old, leaving behind a nation born from expulsion. Isaac remained in the land, the heir of a specific alliance. Today, archaeologists argue over the locations of or the literal meaning of their ages, but for the millions caught in the crossfire, the question is existential. A young Israeli soldier on the northern border and a young Iranian in Tehran are both carrying stories that converge at the same point: an old man, two women, and a fracture that never healed. The tragedy of this epic is that it wasn't born from pure evil. Sarah wasn't a villain. She was a desperate woman trying to fulfill a promise that seemed biologically impossible. Hagar wasn't a villain. She was a servant who finally found a sense of power. Abraham wasn't a villain. He was a man caught between his love for two sons and his obedience to what he believed was a divine plan. They were all human, acting out of fear, jealousy, and impatience. We must learn from this, brothers and sisters. Great historical catastrophes often begin with small, understandable human decisions. One night in a tent, a mistress's hardness, a husband's silence, a boy's mockery, these were the seeds of a civilizational fracture. Abraham died at 175, full of days, but could he have died in peace, knowing he had sent his firstborn into the desert with only a skin of water and a piece of bread? The history that began with a promise of universal blessing ended up creating one of the greatest divisions in human history, not because God failed, but because humans tried to accelerate the divine plan with human shortcuts. Today, the world still deals with the consequences of that impatience. What appeared to be a simple solution to a family problem 4,000 years ago created a conflict that no war has ended and no peace treaty has cured. If you want to uncover more of these deep, hidden truths that explain the world we live in today, you are in the right place. We are peeling back the layers of history to show you how the Word of God is still alive and active in our headlines. Don't miss our next revelation. Click that subscribe button right now and join the Bible Mysteries Africa family. If this story touched your heart or opened your eyes, hit the like button and share this video with your community. Let us spread the wisdom of the ancients to every corner of Africa and the world. Comment below. Do you think peace is possible between these two brothers, or is the fracture too deep? We want to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching Bible Mysteries Africa. Trust in the Lord's timing, for His plans are higher than ours. May God bless you and keep you until we meet again.